Hi, everybody. Happy September 1st, Rabbit Rabbit. I hope everybody is having great weather like I am here in Philly. It's a beautiful, beautiful day compared to this day last year where we had Hurricane Ida really wreak some havoc. So I'm really, really thankful that this September 1st is, I hope it's the sign of some really great fall weather, which is my favorite season. Looking forward to it. And Lawrence is going to be joining us momentarily. In the meantime, I have Ira Wolf and Jay Hurt here to talk about decoding leaders. And Ira is the president of Poise for the Future Company. He's an author. He's a TEDx speaker. He considers himself a millennial trapped in a boomer body. And Jay Hurt, who has been a very kind sponsor of C3 and ConCon, is COO of the Academy of Creative Coaching, and he's a relationship and confidence coach. So we want to talk about decoding leadership. But first, let me just tell everybody who's here. Number one, if you're here, let us know you're here. I can see the number of people here, but I can't see where they're coming from. Please feel welcome to pop in some comments, pop in some questions, pop in your opinions. We welcome that. If you're watching the replay, let us know that. Let us know you're here. Let us know where you're viewing from. C3 is a community on LinkedIn, co-managed by myself and Lawrence Henderson. It's the purpose of C3 is to co-create a more conscious corporate landscape. So everybody in the C3 community, which is a little over 200 people now, are committed to co-creating a more conscious corporate landscape through events like this, where we just started digging into some of these topics around conscious leadership, the sticky points, the how do we navigate this? How is this going to help us practically in our leadership roles, and how can we spread consciousness through these practices to other people? So Ira and Jay have both been panelists before, so they know the deal. We're just going to have a really organic conversation. Nothing's really been prepared. Decoding leadership was a topic that was voted on by the C3 community. Every month we ask them, what do you want us to talk about? What's hot? So there are a bunch of people who are interested in this topic. I hope they show up and ask some questions, because there's no real, it could mean anything, right? We're going to talk about all the things that decoding leaders could mean, the implications of that, and what that looks like. Jay and Ira both wanted to be here to talk about this. So I'm going to start with Jay. Jay, what about this topic drew you to want to be here with us today to talk about it?
Good question, Karen. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I always love being a part of the C3 conversations, right? So for me, I think it's important to understand what good leadership really looks like, right? So when we think about, at least when I think about decoding leaders, so what does that look like in my particular space, right? As you mentioned in my bio, I'm a COO of a coach training company. So I have a team that I have to lead, a team that depends on me. So when they look for leadership, what do they look for in me? What do they look for in my CEO? So I'm always, working to learn more about that, understand what that looks like. I know what I believe it looks like, but I also know that we're always evolving, growing, and changing. And I think for everyone out there that is in a leadership position, if you're growing your teams, you're evolving your teams, or if you are working to get to a leadership position, understanding what leadership really looks like in you, your space, and your company culture, I think it's incredibly important. So that's what drew me to this conversation, having a conversation with Lawrence about this. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of dig deeper into it.
Excellent. I love that you said that leadership is ever evolving. It's different for each person. Whatever we're decoding and talking about today, it's not static. It's bound to adapt and change. Great points. Yeah. Ira, how about you? You jumped on this topic too.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, and it's great to be here with Jay and have this conversation. To me, I mean, on the surface, it's understanding, what good leadership looks like, what a good leader looks like, and maybe more on leadership, because I know there's a lot of leaders out there, and it's certainly more than a title that we have. It's not a role that we move into. I want to be a leader. I mean, people can get that title pretty easily, but understanding leadership which really comes down to decoding leadership. What's the recipe? And there's not a single recipe. It's not like, I'm using my mother's recipe or I'm using my father's recipe or they wrote it down. It's sort of going back to that I remember my mother, grandparents, or aunt, uncle, and you ask them what the recipe was and they go, well, you just take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it was never written down and you try to duplicate it and it doesn't come out right. And so it's ever evolving. It's ever changing. And it certainly depends on the environment. And we're living in a pretty volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment at VUCA. So
VUCA world.
It's exciting. Yep.
I like how you said that you compared it to a recipe, because honestly, when you experiment, right, then sometimes you accidentally strike upon some kind of magic. And I think that can happen in leaders too. Welcome, Lawrence. So good to have you here.
What's up, everybody? Talk about decoding leadership. I just got out of a full morning leadership training with some people across the pond. So locked and loaded for this conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much for always having me, Karen. What's going on,
yeah.
Ira?
Hello.
We're just getting Jay and Ira's view on what decoding leadership means. And I know that you and Jay were talking about it. Do you want to add your own view on decoding leadership, what that means, what that looks like?
Oh, man, it's about having the decoder ring. Right. It's again, I'm thinking about when you talk about decoding, it's how to finally get through and speak the language that is going to move people from one step to the next. And again, unspookifying leadership. I think I just made up a word because a lot of people, it's over the years, it's one of the things, so much research on it, right? If you type in leadership in a Google search, billions of results will come back. But when you ask people how to, there's all these different versions of it. And again, and depending on who was a mentor to you, what you observed growing up, it can take on so many different faces to where now you have just as many leadership styles. And depending on what's worked for you. And I think decoding it is a matter of, for me, being able to be what the moment needs you to be. And viewing it from the lens of one style is not better over another style, but can you be fluid in how you engage others? And so I think decoding leadership is really giving people the keys to develop and continue sharpening their saw as they intend to influence in whatever spaces they find themselves in.
Yeah, good points. I mean, the language part is huge, right? I mean, that's a huge part of it. And then also, we talked about it looking different from person to person. And then, what you were saying was, what do these moments demand of a leader? Really great points. Yeah. When I think of decoding leadership, it's funny, we all had a different perspective of what this meant. I thought mostly, and that's natural, of course, we're all coming from various perspectives. I was thinking about the branding that I do for my clients and how it is very particular for them and how they need to be able to decode their own leadership for others, as well as to decode the leadership of their teams, the people, like really just figuring out what is this person, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the places where magic can happen, and how do we communicate that, articulate that, promote that, so that leaders can make the maximum impact and put themselves in the places that they're most needed. So that was my view of it. Who wants to get started here? Who has like some burning perspectives on decoding leadership? I mean, there's some things that come up every single event we have, right? But what are they, Lawrence? I'm sure you can like rattle off a bunch of things that come up almost every time we talk here.
Consciousness, awareness, emotional intelligence. What are some other ones? Brene Brown. That's a leadership style in and of itself. Those are top of mind.
Yeah. I am in the middle of actually Compass of the Heart myself. You were reading that the last time I think we talked, and now I'm in the middle of that book. So emotions, right? Emotions and understanding them, giving them a name, having the power to pinpoint them. how about anybody else? Like, what are some things, what are some tenets of leadership decoding that come to mind for you? Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And again, I mean, I'm with Lawrence and you, Karen, and I'm sure what Jay will contribute as well. It's it's part of, whether it's consciousness, empathy, emotional intelligence. There's a whole long list of competencies, but at the root of it is it's understanding what your purpose is. It's understanding what we call our why.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we want to do it? And some people want to be in charge. So we work with a program which is been incredibly helpful. And again, I'm an older baby boomer. I've definitely got a couple of years on most of you, and yet I'm. It was difficult for me to articulate uh, leadership, or why did I want to do why did I do what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And we came across this why, and it looked at 9 life perspectives, and I'll just share mine. I mean, I'll
Great.
be authentic and do that. So it looked at 9 of them, and 3 of them happened to be, one is my driver is contribute. So it's helping, is sharing, is helping others, and being part of something. And certainly I've had my share of leadership roles, not only in my company, but volunteering. It seemed like any committee I ever got on, I always end up as chair or on the board of what I've did. But that wasn't necessarily my goal. My goal was to take an active role so I can contribute, so other people benefited, from that. Now I'm also a capitalist, so many times I like to financially benefit from that. But in the end game, it was, even I was in a career, I made a ton of money, and I was definitely contributing, but I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy what I did. So at the end of the day is, did I contribute? But then what we talk about is why, how, and what. And the why is why I do it, so I can contribute, and how I do it is making things better. So as soon as I hear something, my nature, and this is probably where the leader comes in, the leadership qualities come in, is how do I can make it better. So I can either go and go, oh, I know a better way, and just take charge, or I can involve people and say, and not necessarily say there's a better way, but help people lead them to a better way.
Hmm.
And so I can, my why is contribute, my how is how I get it done, is making things better. And I guess my knack is the what. And I do that by, I've always been a good integrator. I've been able to connect the dots. I'm a, overused word, think outside the box, see the white space, whatever euphemism we want to use, that we tend to get into as consultants and coaches and all those things. But I've always been good at that. And is seeing things that other people don't see, um, and making that connection. But it's not done because, oh, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I just got to find this new, interesting, innovative thing. It's that I do it because I want to contribute. I want to make things better for other people. And ultimately, my means of getting to that end is by, again, connecting the dots, seeing outside there. But there's other things. I mean, some people want to be masters. Some people just like the challenge. And well, that's my third one, is the challenge. But some people like to connect the dots. Some people like to get it right, to make things right, um, as opposed to make things better. So there's 9 different perspectives. I mean, I don't want to dominate and take the whole the time, but you can go through each of those. But I think it's really, really important when you decode leadership is to understand what's your why. I mean, why do you want to do it, and how are you going to get there, and then develop the skills to be able to do that. And then it's looking at, when's the right time to apply that, or where's the right place? Because there are certain organizations, there's certain people that I'm not a good fit. I mean, they need leadership, but it may be one of you rather than me.
I'm so glad you brought up an assessment. I was wondering when assessments were going to come up. I figured they would in this conversation somewhere. I'm glad you brought them up, because assessments, I'm fascinated by assessments. I really am. I love all the different kinds of assessments that you can take. I think they are great in raising your self-awareness and helping you put words to, what it is that you do well, and what you do that's unique, and how you think and how that creates the value. I also have this complex relationship with them as well, where I tend to resist them as definitions for people, because people are all dynamic, and they're not, as Lawrence would say, it's not either or, it's and, right?
Yeah.
They're not on one side of a spectrum or another. Typically, like, we're really referring to MBTI, where it's like you're either, a P or a T, or an F or a P, or whatever it is. And I think that what I want from assessments is not necessarily to define for other people. It was really interesting when I was teaching at Drexel, the way we were using the MBTI. It was definitely a self-awareness tool, but it was also an empathy tool. Like, other people do things differently, right? This is back to our first conversation about what decoding it means. That it means different for every person. But other people are not going to do things the way you do things. You're going to get into the workplace, and you're not going to understand why people are doing things the way that they're doing them. This is why. This is because they're just different in this way. Jay, what do you want to say about decoding leadership? And you don't have to trail on to the assessment conversation if you don't want to, but I know that you have your microphone off, so you want to say something.
No worries. So actually, kind of tying into what Ira was speaking about a moment ago, in some ways, right? I think one of the most important things that leaders do, and I know this has been a buzzword for the past 5 or 7 years, but I think there's a lot of value to it, is that leaders create culture, right? So setting the vision for whatever the culture looks like. So sometimes we get caught up in that, because we throw the word around so much. What's that corporate culture like? What does that look like? What does that feel like? But one of the things that I've seen in organizations that I've worked with and worked for, and organizations that I've been like, either a vendor for or a partner with, is that the greatest leaders that I've worked with, they help to execute that culture, right? They're exemplary of what they're trying to build in their organization. They're exemplary of what they want to see in that organization. So not only do they talk about it, do they have the great speeches and the motivational speeches and the lunch and learns and these things, right? But they actually walk that out, right? So when someone's in need, they're there to support them. When they want to create a safe space, they make sure that there's a safe space for everyone in the culture and in the room, right? My company talks about JEDI training, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. In that space, we have conversations around those things, right? We make sure that people are up to date and on the same page, and we have discussions, and sometimes they get really interesting, right? So we want to make sure that everybody's involved and everyone is able to be on at the very least, if not on the same page, we're on the same frequency, so that we're moving forward and we're honoring each other in these spaces. And then to that point, I think the supporting point of really building that great culture, exhibiting that culture, executing on that culture, is empowering people to be their best selves, right? So I think that the best leaders that I have worked with and leaders that I admire, I see them empower others. And when you empower others and you trust them, you believe in them, you build rapport with them, much like Ira said, you connect with them and you connect those dots. And some of those people, again, to his point, may want to be, they may want to master something. They may want to create a mastery. You help them do that. So the more that you empower others, the more that they believe in you and trust you, and the more that the better, I should say, that you move the organization forward. So that's kind of my thought process, kind of where we are in the discussion right now, all about, building, empowering, exhibiting culture.
Ooh, Jay, I love it. And I'm gonna kind of dovetail on yours as well in thinking about pulling back in that assessment part, specifically things like MBTI and the rest of those. What the assessment, and I'm gonna use this word on purpose, exposes in a lot of cases, particularly for leaders, is their preferences. And so as leaders, decoding this part is that leader being conscious about what their preference is communicating to others. And so which speaks to how that ties into when you walk into an organization and you got the posters on the wall, but your posters aren't necessarily what people are experiencing when it comes to trust, respect, integrity, all these other things. That in and of itself can send a different message to where it'd be like, well, wait, time out. I hear what you're saying, but I'm listening to what you're doing. And these are the things I think when it comes to leadership is that consciousness in the way that we engage. And so that others, when we're really checking in on, okay, I need to know, Karen, what message are you actually experiencing from me? Not necessarily what are you hearing from me? And I think that is the part when it comes to us as individual leaders, as we're intending to influence, knowing what those messages are and how people are engaging with us. And so it becomes that communicated feedback loop that helps decode these spaces.
Yeah, Lawrence, I'm so happy that you said you brought up experience, because that was one of the things that we were talking about. And it goes back to something you said, Jay. It took me almost 40 years in business to figure this out. And one of the things is we keep talking about culture, creating this culture. I just contributed to a new book that'll be coming out in the fall, and it's about create a great culture in a remote workspace. And the reality is we can define what a culture is, but the culture is really what people experience, and where people go away on a strategy meeting, we define what it is, we build the posters, we get the colors, we get the taglines, we talk about it, and it's all rah rah. But if people don't feel it, if they don't experience it, and it doesn't meet their needs, then that's a problem. So really, where people create a culture first, they define the culture, create the strategy, and almost hope that creates the experience. You really need to create the experience first, that employee experience, and the experience defines the culture. It really is. The culture is the outcome of the experience. And if you got a toxic culture, it's the outcome of the experience. If you have a great culture, it's the outcome of the experience. So I think people have it backwards, and it took me, and I may change in another 40 years if I'm around. But I think people have it backwards in the way they approach it, and they do everything right by name, in words and and actions, but it's all about the behavior, and that's where the disconnect is. And I'll just throw one thing in about assessments, and you're absolutely right. Everyone was absolutely right. Assessments are just used incorrectly. Assessment, it's not a test. And I think that's the difference. People say, oh, it's a test, so you're good at this and you're good at that. And that may be true if you're taking a math test or an Excel test or a typing test, that here's what your skill level is. But when we're talking about MBTI, we're talking about DISC. I mentioned the Y. We have an AQ. You can, for anybody watching, you can see it in the background, the AQ plus. It's adaptability quotient. There's all those things, and there are assessments that just says, where are you in this current place? And is that impacting your ability to grow and thrive and be successful? And it's important from the leadership side. It's not only important for leaders to know who they are, but it's important that those assessments are based on different models, and they give you a frame of reference of how do I communicate with other people. Because if I'm an introvert and you go, hey, we're going to have everybody work remote. Well, that's all fine and good because they like to work remote, but other people need to be connected, and other people, just because you love to be around people and be connected, that may not be for everybody. And so, part of the assessments is really understanding who you are, but more importantly, and that's emotional intelligence, it's not only self-awareness, and self-management, but it's the managing relationship of other people and recognizing what their needs are. But assessments, Karen, I know you said you have a sort of love-hate relationship with them. It's true. And the hate part is I hate when people misuse them too, because they often get misused, that you're an extrovert. You're not good with, you're an introvert. You're not good with people. That's really BS. And just word of advice, stop using them that way.
Yeah, no, great points. I mean, they have their place, they have their application, and applied, in the most productive ways, they can be really powerful tools, and applied in inappropriate ways, they can just be minefields for misunderstanding each other, and justifying things as well, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, and I want to throw this out because it sort of takes it to the next step, because we're throwing a word around about connecting. Mm-hmm. And whether leaders are connecting with the people are connecting with the culture, which means they have a good experience, however that evolves. My partner, Jason Cochran, he's my podcast partner, but we're probably going to create a true partnership. He's identified his model is called the 4 C's, and it looks at 4 different types of connections. And I think this is really important when, from a leadership, and we're talking about decoding leaders. There's a connection to yourself, and that's the self-awareness. It's understanding who you are, what do you align with, what are your values, understanding that. And then there's a connection to others. And, that's the most common one when we think about connections. But there's also a connection to the role. Again, I left a career. I wasn't connected to it at all. I was very successful, made a lot of money, didn't work too hard. I worked hard, but I golfed more than I worked at one point, and people go, wow, what a great life. And I go, yeah, but I hate it. I just didn't like it. And I walked away, 28 years ago.
It's the infamous disengagement that all employers are trying to combat, right?
Yeah. And people said, oh, you're a quitter. I mean, you quit, why would you quit? And I go, okay, you can call it quitting. And to me, I was just another chapter in my life. So we have this connection to ourself, connection to others, connection to our role, and then the connection to the organization. And I think it's a really good model. And and again, it's evolving. And so I'd love to hear what you guys say about it, and anybody else who's, watching. But in order, you really need to have all 4 of those firing. And they each are developed differently. It's not that one single recipe. Oh, if you follow these 10 steps, you got it, because you may get one connection, but not the other. And again, you can have a great job and a great role, but be in the wrong organization. You be in the right organization, but you hate your job, or you're not connecting with the people. And it's a guideline. It's a map. And it's not going to be easy, because if you elevate one, the other one may tip. It's like a seesaw. But how do you create that balance? So I think it's a really good perspective, that when we talk about connection, it's just not this broad connection, because I think people assume, well, I don't feel connected to the organization, or I don't connected to the job, or I don't feel connected to other people. Those are 3 different approaches, and leaders have to be pretty perceptive of where's the disconnect.
I will probably quote you and borrow those areas of connection as a career coach. That's a really good measurement of self-assessing your own career. How engaged are you? Right? And everybody is in that boat now, this quiet quitting going viral, which is really misunderstood, vilified, propped up. It's kind of poured out into everything right now. Lots of different perspectives on it. But I mean, when things like that, when those phrases come out, when they become popular, when they're on everybody's lips, it makes people wonder, like, am I quiet quitting? Is my team quiet quitting? Like, what's going on? Putting those phrases around things, as Lauren said earlier, the language. Jay, what do you want to say?
Put that in perspective. It just literally came across right before we went on the air. It came from Statista. They do all these great statistics, and they did a survey, and it was like 1/3 of people 2/3 of people never even heard of quiet quitting. And then they asked the 1/3 that did, and there was like 1 million different definitions. It's those lazy millennials and lazy Gen Z, all the way up to, hey, people have a right to live. You know, and
Yeah.
they don't have to, you know, why should I give you 70 hours and I only get paid for 40? Well, you know, it's practical. So, but we make a big deal of it. It's in headlines. I've probably done 6 media interviews in the last, literally in the last week about quiet quitting. What do I think about it? And ultimately, it's like 2/3 of people have no idea what it is. They never even heard about it.
For me, and I'm sure for everybody on this call, it's everywhere, right? Because of what we consume and the communities we are touching. It feels pervasive to me. And if I have a feeling that will spread, but I also hope that there's a lot more clarity around it. I don't know if that'll happen, but Jay, what do you want to say?
So I was just going to share to Ira's point. It made me think, right, when we're talking about connection to self, connection to others, connection to role, connection to organization. So when we look at the Great Resignation, how many people realize that they really weren't connected either to their role or to their organization or to the others in their company? And as they got more connected with self during lockdowns, during what we've dealt with for the past 3 years, they realized that the money is not worth it, or whatever thing that they were trying to achieve, whatever gave them what they thought was fulfillment, it really wasn't worth it when you're not connected in everything that you do, right? If you're not connected to your role, like you said, Ira, it doesn't matter how much money you make or how much golf you play, even though it lowers your handicap. You still don't feel like this is the right place. If you're not connected to the organization, you don't honor their values. You don't fulfill their mission. You're not rocking with their mission statement. So you're like, why am I here? Like, there's more to life. We only get so many years on this earth. There's more to life than this. And I think that's a great that's a great model that your partner has come up with, Ira. I think that's just, that really encapsulates what people have gone through over the past 3 years. And I think, in my opinion, I think it's really enlightening and it's empowering to the workforce, because now when we have people that are in places where they're gifted and talented, they're going to do much better, and those roles are going to blossom, and we're going to get a better workforce because of it. Not a workforce that resign. We're going to get people that are really doing what they do best, and they're planted where they should be planted.
And we'll get better innovation and better solutions for the problems we face now and in the future. Only good things, right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and I think man, amazing points. And I think the people who come up with the terms that are going to be the latest hotness are the same people who painstakingly sat in a group of probably like-minded people that came up with the biases about generation types and needed to lay their insatiable need to label things and not do anything about it. Because as we have the Great Resignation, there's also now the Great Attrition, which speaks to the things Ira and Jay, you just talked about, is that people's connection to themselves. And now the Great Attrition kind of mantra and the things that are inside of that is the people who stuck around after the first, second, and third people from the Great Resignation have left, they stayed, and now they're quitting because the organizations still haven't changed. And so when you talk about decoding leadership, and there's something I truly believe, like, we lead from the inside out. And it's now these people for the first time, it's like red pill, blue pill from the Matrix. It's like they're finally like waking up to self and being like, you know what? I'm my own cheat code. I am my own cheat code. Like, I have the skill set. I have the wherewithal. I have the know-how. When I honor me and then look at the spaces that they desire to be in more often than not and say, you know what? This is what I want life to look like for me moving forward. And organizations haven't kept up. And so that's why they need to hire people like us on this podcast today to come help them bridge that gap, because they're like sitting there like, which way do we go? Like, when it comes to engaging their populations, and their populations have been telling them. And again, people who are listening to us and leaders who are still trying to wrap their minds around this didn't start because of the pandemic. The Great Resignation was happening in 2019. Some of the earlier numbers were coming out mid 2019. They were already quitting you. This just causes it to happen a whole lot quicker and a whole lot more broadcasted than anything else.
Yeah, there's about a million thoughts going through my head, so I'll try to go that. And you're absolutely right, Lawrence. I mean, I've said that for a while. The pandemic just ripped the curtain back on a really fragile system. So all of a sudden, we forgot we want to go back to normal. Well, normal. If we could roll back the clock to 2019. Gallup still was saying 70% of the workforce was disengaged. And then Gallup took a deeper dive and they just released the Gallup State of the Workplace in 2022. Just came out in July. And it's really sad because, they took it one step further. They said engaged and thriving. So they evaluated it and there's only 9% of employees are engaged and thriving. So there's still the 30% that are engaged and go, hey, well, at least we got 3 out of 10 right. But other than look at the other side, the 70% that aren't. And now it's 91% are not engaged and not thriving. Worse is 57% are not engaged and are not thriving, to both of those. And 19% are miserable. And what does miserable mean? That means they surveyed millions of people. It's Gallup. And they looked at 19% of the people said in the last 24 hours, I felt these 5 things: sad, stressed, angry, anxious, and pain. So the reality is 1/5 of the people are really physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually all hurting. And that's the normal we want to go back to.
Not any of my clients. I'm going to drop a word here that seems to be underlying a lot of these things. It was underlying behaviors we talked about, preferences. It's underlying that gap that Lawrence was talking about filling. And I'm just going to drop this word, and then whoever wants to jump on it, tell me where you think this fits in Decoding Leaders. Belief systems. I love Lawrence's reaction. Ira, looks like you're ready to talk about that.
Yeah, it's all attitude. I mean, that's what we just talked about. We talked about the why, the nine different perspectives. I mean, that's gonna reflect your attitude. You can have a more positive, better attitude if that comes to be. I wrote a book literally 20 years ago, Business Values and Motivators. It was based on a model by Spranger, and they looked at personal values, and we used to call them attitudes. And it does. It affects your attitude and this is beyond the good and the bad attitude, chips on shoulders and all that other stuff. But we looked at, there's certain people that if you value learning, and you have that opportunity, either made by your own or the environment you're in, you're going to have a better attitude. If you are motivated by money and you make, if that's what what motivates you and that's what you value, and then that's going to happen. If you have opportunities to grow, we call it power and authority. So if you have an opportunity to climb the ladder and grow, we can't even define or decide what attitudes and systems are, but everything I just described is based on a belief system. It's how we grew up. If we're told that knowledge is power and education means everything, and we're on and it's been built into our childhood and adulthood that by learning there's a value to that and I feel good, then that's my belief system. The more I know, the more challenging it is. If it's about who owns the most cars and biggest homes on the block, then that's going to be my belief system. Now, that doesn't mean the belief system's right or wrong. It just means that's a belief system. And so it still goes back to where we started this conversation, is we need to understand who we are, how we see the world, and then allow that to help us understand that there's different belief systems that people have. And we're not talking political. I mean, you can talk about that, but we're not talking political, religious. I mean, we're getting in not only deep, but those became pretty divisive at times. Especially Jay. I mean, talking about DEI and things. I mean, there's just good and bad positions, but we're just talking about. I can look at the same thing that each of you can through a different lens, and get different enjoyment or different passion about it, or just see the world in a different way, but we can get along. It's just, you can come to the right, I can come to the left, we both end up in the center. And that's the problem. Everybody says your system's right and your system's wrong. So that's my belief system about belief systems.
So I'd like to add something there. That's really good stuff, Ira, by the way. One of the things that has frustrated me with belief systems with leaders in the past is leaders in corporate spaces who have a belief system that does not align with the organization. I have worked for, right, Lawrence, exactly. I have worked for leaders who were diametrically opposed to the organization, and they would tell me things like, well, such and such wants you to do this. This company says we need to do this, so do that, right? But do it my way, right? Don't do it the way that our values, our core beliefs are. Don't do it the way the mission is designed. Do it my way, right? And then I had the experience a few times of trying to, so if you live in integrity, right, you walk in integrity, you're trying to find that balance. So I'm trying to honor my leader, and at the same time I'm trying to honor the mission of the company. And something would happen where I may fall one way or another, right? I can remember falling one way toward the leader, what the leader wanted, not what the company wanted, and then my VP telling me that, so the company wanted you to do this and you didn't do this, and then I have a choice to make. Do I throw my leader under the bus, or do I fall on the sword, right? So again, for me, I want to protect that leader, but at the same time, I want to be open and honest. So I didn't throw him under the bus, but we had some really challenging conversations after that, right? So I think that when we talk about belief systems and leadership in corporate spaces, understanding that you're connected to your role, right? Going back to your original model there, Ira, you're connected to your role. Your belief system aligns with that role, and your belief system aligns, excuse me, your belief system aligns with that organization. If it doesn't, and you're not a fit, maybe it's time for you to find a space where you fit, right? That way you're not leading people. You'll feel like you're herding cats because you don't really know how to lead them in the right direction for the company, in general.
Man, so y'all dancing in my sandbox, because again, if we talk about belief systems, we're talking about the basic principles and tenets around the things that help us move forward through life. And Jay and Ira and Karen, what y'all been describing is being able to understand it's not a this or, it's a this and how are we aware of how it's impacting how we move forward together in success? And I think because a lot of organizations, there's been this competition of belief systems of, again, from the premise of that's right, that's wrong, not just different. I think that's what causes a lot of us to have these kind of picking sides conversations. And I'll never forget, I was having a conversation with a gentleman, and because of what I look like, they assumed political affiliation. And me being coach me, I ask a question. I say, hey, could me and you run for office together? And they were like, and I just saw them begin to be uncomfortable about even the notion, just from a fundamental belief standpoint. And again, I hadn't even acknowledged what political affiliation I was yet. This is off of their belief about me, that they were having this problem. And so I think just that in and of itself, that acknowledgement in our society is that can leaders be aware of what's triggering them and therefore understand how that is impacting how they're engaging others, because that is what they're living through. That is, you need to identify what principles, tenets, and beliefs are actually encouraging your behavior. And I think it's that part right there. When we start talking about decoding leadership, it's really understanding the things that cause us to make those transactions from A to B. And for us to ask Ira's question, like, okay, am I aware of it? And is it helping or hurting the spaces that where I'm, or in the direction I'm desiring to go in? And I think that's the part of belief systems. We really get into this point, and again, is it morality, right? And the fundamentals of how we engage each other. I think when we start landing here, it's really decoding this thing, and it's not hard math. We're not talking about the Pythagorean theorem and people like to do these science experiments. We're having real conversations with other human beings. And as a community, can we just be human together that take care of each other? And I think leaders that start there in the very basics of it all, I think we could start building from there. But it's all the other mess that comes in.
Let me ask you this, Lawrence, because I was going on one track until that very end when you were just saying this is where we all start from. We all start from this place where we're all human, right? I mean, when you're working with other people and you're, as Ira said, connected to the mission, your role, the company, understanding your triggers and your traumas and being committed to healing them. And being aware of how that's hard work. It's hard work. I think that that's hopefully another thing that comes up a lot in these conversations is that when you're a conscious leader, you have to be committed to constantly evaluating your own triggers and traumas and owning how they impact other people and working on sorting through that with people, right?
Yeah.
Having those hard conversations. How does that look?
Yeah. I would say, before the gentlemen jump in, I want to hear their thoughts. For me personally, it looks like being an action-based leader who is vulnerable enough to show others that you're practicing through this. And that practice is that evolution that I think a lot of us were looking for in others. Like that's the connection point. Like, I want to know Ira as a leader is doing his own work, and he's not making me, his employee, bear the weight of his development, or I just got to either do it his way or else. And I think for me, what it looks like is practice, like drinking your own Kool-Aid when it comes to, okay, what do I want the world around me to look like in my sphere of influence? And I'll shout you out, Karen. I mean, Karen did something amazing for me about a month ago when we talk about decoding leadership, where she was like, you know what, I'm not just a conscious leader. I'm going to actually show what this looks like and hold space for another leader, for another coach where life is lifing. And the space that Karen held for me when it comes to just how I wanted to engage life after my father passed, and like, I'm immensely grateful for that, because the people that are around me are mostly coaches, but the action that you took of actually holding that space for me and having zero expectation, like we talk about it, like, oh, I have no expectations of you, but to actually experience it in somebody else, like it was an emotional thing for me to have another leader that has their own life and hold space and be like, I got you. And I think that is the cheat code when it comes to decoding leadership, is what do your actions communicate to others? And those are the things that I think, and again, the foundations of experience really, really, really speak louder than anything else. I speak for me.
That's good stuff, Lawrence. I'd like to jump in real quickly. So two things come to mind. Really, when we're thinking about that impact and doing the work and moving forward. One thing is, I think leaders often forget their impact, right? Assess your impact. If you have an organization and you have 10 people, or you have 150 people, or you have 1,000 people or 10,000 people in your organization, Stop and think about those lives that you impact. These people talk to you about all types of things that are going on in their lives. Never mind the job, right? There's so many things, that so many ways that you impact them, and they look up to you, whether you know it or not, right? Like Charles Barkley said, I'm not a role model. Yes, you are. Like, you're in that position. You are a role model. People look up to you. People want to see you care about them and help them win, right? So assess that impact. And then the second thing is, and you alluded to this, Lawrence, so I maybe just be reiterating, is how do you always do the work to get better, right? So if you're always putting in the work and you realize that this is a moving target that you never fully fulfill, you're just continually working to get better and learning and growing and adding that to your cachet of, your skill set and your personality traits, then you're always on the right path, and you're building, and people are able to support you and follow you and believe in you as a leader. So that's kind of my thoughts there.
Ari, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I was just waiting to see if anybody else has anything to say. Sometimes I felt like I was dominating and taking the lead, right? So, it's a lot of what was being said and by both, well, all three of you. What we're talking about is a growth mindset. I reflect back and I look at so many things that I said, I'm not sure I ever said I'm too old to do it, but I'm not in the right place. It's not the right time. I'm not smart enough, or I didn't have enough money, or whatever it is. And we all fall, and those are belief systems. I mean, it's the fixed mindset. And for those who aren't familiar with it, you can just go search growth mindset, fixed mindset, Carol Dweck, DWECK. And that's really the heart of this AQ Plus program that we developed, was how can we help people get beyond this? And it really came out, what gave it impetus was over the last 2-3 years, especially with the pandemic, of so many people struggling things. And all you heard is, I'm not very good with technology, or I'm not good working from home, and they had to, and then they adapted and they figured it out. And then they hit a brick wall. But I go back to, and I hear this, I teach a college class, and I hear that, I'll never get a high grade. Or, we have a mixed class. We have 22-year-olds and we have 50-year-olds in there because it's a master's level program. And it's like, well, I'm too old to be able to do this technology, or this must be so much easier for somebody young. So everybody has these excuses. And it all comes down to what both Lawrence and Jay had just said. We're on a journey. We have to give permission to not only to other people, but to ourselves, that we're going to make mistakes. We're going to flub. We're going to, you have to try it. And, the first, again, I'm an older baby boomer. I mean, I learned technology on my own. I learned how to do all this stuff. And there's young people that say, oh, I'm not very good on camera. I hate doing that, or I can't use that. And then, I have a lot of peers that say that as well. So how do you get to the point where you try it, you flub, you're okay, you learned from it. You may not be a master, you may not be a thought leader, you may not be the expert, but you can try it. And from that, you may have learned something that you didn't think you can learn. And it may have helped you in something else. Again, I came from dentistry, and when people say, well, how did you, people tell me, it's like, well, what are you going to do? I mean, for those if you didn't know, I mean, my first career, I was a dentist. Haven't done it in 28 years because I didn't like it. But ultimately, it was like, well, how are you going to coach people in business? Or how are you going to, what do you know about business? Well, one is I was in, young 40s, and I sold a very successful business. And because it was transferable, but I learned critical thinking skills. I learned how to solve difficult problems. I didn't just go task and drill and fill. I did a lot of other things, but I learned how to create a team. I had 16 people, 2 different shifts. I had a partner who had an absolutely different personality. We learned how to mix and match the teams who worked better with that. Learned how to market. I was computerized in 1987. I didn't go to college for that. They don't teach that when you're going to pre-med. Computer skills. I learned how to be computerized. We learned how to market. We learned how to deliver good customer service. I transferred those skills to everything else I did in life. And people still get stuck with this job title. Well, this is what I do, and I'm not good with that. Or I'm not good with, I'm not good with math. I'm not good with technology. Everybody needs to get over that. But how do you do that? And as a leader, that's what you have to do. I mean, decoding leadership. Leaders have to help people get at least take a little bit of a step outside their comfort zone. Leaders need to help become comfortable being uncomfortable, help others become that, because many leaders are willing to jump out of the plane and, without the chute, and then figure it out on the way down. That's not the majority of the population. People are addicted to certainty, and we need to help them through it.
And that brings up something that Lauren says a lot, which is get comfortable being uncomfortable. That comes up a lot too. We really touched on a lot. I like this topic. I wasn't really sure what it would look like when we all jumped in. We don't prepare for these events. We just come in and have a pretty organic conversation. It always winds up working out really well that way. We looked at different ways it can look, that it is, about each leader finding their own way. But we also covered, some of the things that seem to be tenets and being a leader. I will look forward to compiling a list of those things that came out that come up all the time from this event, as I do after every event, develop a summary and some questions that we talked about to drive people back to the replay, back to the C3 community, because that's what this is all about, making sure that we have these important conversations. We talked about practical things, how it looks, frameworks, tools, resources. I want to give everybody here a chance to talk about where to find them, if and how to reach them. So Jay, why don't you just go ahead and let people know, if they want to know more about decoding leadership and confidence and everything else that you're an expert at, how do they find you?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Karen and Lawrence. I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you for your wisdom and expertise as well, Ira. I've learned so much from you. I took notes. First of all, if you're interested in leadership training, coach training, Jedi training, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, please check us out at the Academy of Creative Coaching. That is the academyofcreativecoaching.com. And if you're interested in relationship coaching or confidence building specifically, check out my YouTube channel. It's called The Confident Charismatic, where we have a lot of fun talking about charisma, confidence, and just winning at life. So check me out on either one of those spaces.
Go ahead, Ira. Why don't you tell them how to find you? Thank you, Jay. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you.
Yeah, and a thanks to everyone here, but you and Karen for reaching out, and Lawrence, allowing me to contribute, make things better, and challenge the group. So I got my 3 whys, my why, how, and what today fulfilled. You can reach me at irawolf.com. IRAWOLFE.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so reach out to me there. Put a ton of content as well. Or you can go to AQ Plus Mindset, and you'll learn a little bit about the growth mindset. If anybody's interested, I mentioned the why before, the why or the why operating system. Also, just reach out to me. We don't have the website up yet about that, but reach out and I'll be happy to share what we have. And if you're interested in finding your why, we'll walk you through it.
Thank you, Ira. Lawrence, why don't you take us out?
All right, y'all. So it's been another fabulous show. And thank you, Karen, always so much for coordinating these and being a part of the C3 community and allowing us this partnership space. Ira and Jay, thank you so much for dropping platinum nuggets today. Always a pleasure to be around other thought partners as we build out this C3 community. And so if you're someone out there looking for a conscious community of leaders, I've dropped the link to connect with the C3 community several times on this live. And if you're looking or watching the hashtag replay, definitely connect with us. And if you desire to speak or be on this panel, we are always looking for folks to come on, share, as we are a growing community who wants to continue to connect and thrive in a meaningful way. And so be always kind to each other. Karen, thank you again.